How's it going, my friends? Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. This is Lord Lever. This is my new video for today. So, ideology challenges politics. Politics, along with physical labor and childbirth, is in Christian terms one of the curses of mankind. Machines have taken much of the sting from labor, and childbirth is no longer the pain it was. What about the curse of politics? If men were angels, no government would be needed. But since some sort of government is needed, could we not find a better solution than the state revealed to us by history as riddled with war, poverty, or violence? High hopes of this kind have often erupted among the poor on the margins of politics, and have sometimes captured the centers. Such hopes unmistakably derived from a millennial version of Christianity, and they had explosive consequences. So guys, for this chapter I'll try not to stop as much and not ask as many questions because it's a bit late, and I'll just try to get with the chapter, and next chapter I'll be more detailed. Anabaptists believing in the imminence of a new heavenly order took over the German town of Münster in 1534, for example, and instituted what was thought to be a perfect community. It bore a remarkable resemblance to modern totalitarianism. A tendency to religious despotism was evident in the English Civil War after 1642. A clergyman wrote in a typical vein to bring forth the civil government, and all things here below in the image and resemblance of things above. A powerful tradition with roots in philosophy has also focused attention on the project of the perfect society. Many have been bewitched by Plato's account of the philosopher escaping the cave of shadows in which most people live, and seeing the reality of things, that true ruler could only be a philosopher, for only philosophers have access to knowledge needed to guide a true community. Much later, the 18th century philosophers thought that their grasp of reason constituted the knowledge needed to bring justice to the world, a process many of them could not distinguish from sweeping away the Ancient regime. The Ancient regime, it was their writers who abandoned the traditional Western loathing for despotism, for they recognized that the new order demanded not only a knowledge but also unlimited power. The European state, largely bounded by constitutionality and the rule of law, was for this very reason doomed to imperfection. The modern soil in which these ideas have grown was prepared by Francis Bacon, who took the purpose of human life to be accumulation of useful knowledge in the cause of improving human conditions. By the end of the 18th century, technology had acquired such power over nature that advanced thinkers were already dreaming of exercising the same sort of power over society. Their first adventure came in France in 1789. The fact that it culminated in tyranny merely set them back, as if were to a drawing board, sent them back to a drawing board. Many streams of thought fed an aspiration which resembled a search for magical power. Religious speculation about progressive revelation and a pamphlet idea, rather than an external creator of it, spread into philosophy. In Scotland, a number of thinkers such as Adam Smith and Adam Ferguson saw the history of humanity as a progression, an evolution. People had evolved from nomads to that of a pastoral society, which had given way to agriculture and culminated in the commercial society of modern times. Each step was taken to the higher form of civilization, guided by what Adam Smith called the invisible hand. In Germany, these and many other ideas came to be influential, expounded by the philosopher Hegel, who revealed to his readers that history, which skeptics saw merely as an up and down over the bumps of human folly, actually exhibited a rational structure. Hegel thought that history progressed, the subjects of the modern state enjoyed a fullness of experience which had merely been potential in earlier societies. Hegel was a formidable and complex philosophy. Hegel's was a formidable and complex philosophy, but it conveyed apocalyptic strivings to a group of young disciples who thought that he had solved, or at very least nearly solved, the riddle of human existence. The most famous of them was Karl Marx, who fused Hegel with his burgeoning socialist ideas of early industrial Europe. Marx detected the fall of man in the institution of private property, which had apparently emerged after a nomadic of primitive communism. The destiny of mankind was to recreate the early community ideal in an advanced technological form. Idyllic, but without a Y. And that achievement it was which had been necessitated the sufferings of history. It was Marx's characterization of the modern world which gave him such influence. Hegel had argued that after the slaveries and oppressions of history, modern Europe had at least achieved a civilization in which all were free. Marx revealed to his followers that this form of freedom was actually the most subtle form of oppression ever created. Modern were on the view of Marx and Engels sketched out in a Communist Manifesto, a little more than puppets moved by the mysterious force of capital, which induced them to trade, work, and even think according to a concealed logic of the capitalist mode of production. There's been socialism before, but Marx claimed that this was the first scientific socialism, the knowledge of the human condition which at last, after millennia, being buffed by the wave of historical necessity, allowed mankind to seize the helm of the ship of state and guide it to the port. It only required those who had this knowledge to seize the bridge in a process called revolution. This was so brilliant a vulgarized of long-standing religious and philosophical themes that it had continued to fascinate subsequent generations. It combines a simple melodrama attractive to the people it was designated to mobilize, the unsophisticated proletarian, with an apparatus of ideas that could excite more intellectual followers. Hegel had been tempted to think that history had in a sense come to an end. Marx adopted the idea and located it in the future as a project to struggle for. Unlike Hegel, Marx consigned the state to what later Marxists called the dustbin of history. Indeed, a great deal of what had hitherto constituted civilization would disappear in this new epoch. Morality, for example, and law, philosophy as hell, had torturous wrestling with complicated abstraction dating back to Taoist and Greek pre-Socratics. Would be replaced by a direct and mediated consciousness of human reality, available to all. Mediated consciousness of human reality, available to all. As Marx wrote in one of his most famous utterances, the philosophers have only interpreted the world, the point is to change it. Marxism is important not only historically, but also because it serves as a model for many later revelations of the same kind. Its devotees experienced the immense excitement of people for whom all the confusing elements of life have suddenly fallen into place. It was thus quite different from political writing. One might be passionate, liberal, or conservative, apassionate, support the parliament or the king, advocate or oppose the extension of the franchise, and so on, without in any way imagining that this enthusiasm constituting a revelation. Indeed, in an age in which Christian belief was declining, Marxism was the economic package which supplied its followers with politics, religion, morality, all in one. For this very reason, it is not a political doctrine, though it claims were accepted, it would be something much more significant. Political doctrines give reasons, they talk to each other. Marxism could only declare the truth. For Marx, politics is merely the cast by the deeper processes, cast up by the deeper processes. We thus need to distinguish Marxism and similar revelations on one hand from political doctrines with quite a distinct logic. We may call these doctrines, which promise an earthly revelation, ideologies. Our next task must be to explain this curious word. It was invented in 1797 by a French philosopher, Monsieur de Tracy, who had recently survived the terror by the skin of his teeth. Tracy was working on a central project of the philosophies of that period to clarify the understanding by bringing concepts to the test of experience and discarding those that failed. He might have called this new science psychology, but for its derivation from the Greek psyche, meaning soul, might convey something unacceptably spiritual. So he invented ideology, and it caught on. Its proponent would soon be called ideologues. As liberal republics in the confused decade of the Revolution, they came to support a rising young Bonaparte. He soon discarded them, referring contemptuously to less ideologies as the theorists whose meddling in politics did more harm than good. Tracy continued to develop his science of the understanding over 4 volumes up to 1815, but ideology for the moment survived merely as an occasional term with which to express contempt for impractical intellectuals. In 1847, Marx and Engels wrote a huge work called The German Ideology, in which they attacked their former associates in a circle of young Hegelians. Possessing, as they believed, the truth about how society worked, they needed a term to describe the false beliefs of those, especially the bourgeoisie, who had failed to transcend their social situation. They took up the word ideology. This work was not published until 1927, but the work was launched in a new direction, and already it will be clear that it contained 2 quite opposite ideas, that of truth and that of falsity. Ideology meant for the ideologues themselves a philosophical revealing truth, and for Marx the very falsity which needed to be. Hence, the problem of apparent contradiction disappears, however, when one realizes the falsity of those false ideas is guaranteed by the truth of one's ideas. Ideology refers, as it were, to the negative and positive poles of dogmatic conviction. Marxists had a true understanding of the world, and therefore whatever contradicted must be false. That is ideological, which meant both false and false because reflecting the wrong social situation. The same ambivalent use mark anarchistic versions of the truth or those of radical feminists. So long as one grasps the symbiosis of the term ideology can be without serious confusion as referring both to truth and also to all other beliefs which are judged to be false in terms of that belief. Ideology thus exhausts the entire field of truth and error, so as long one judges that one knows, as Marx before they did, what truth is. We need to follow the adventures of this word a little further. The first adventure happened within Marxism itself. Marxism asserted that ideas reflect material conditions, and the false ideas of the bourgeoisie reflected bourgeois conditions were bourgeois ideology. But since all ideas were thought to be socially produced, the question must arise, where did communist ideas come from? The solution was that they were bubbled up from the experience of the proletarian, who were destined to bring truth-revealing communism into existence. Marxism in these terms was the ideology, the social determined ideas of the rising proletarian, which happened also to be true. Such is the view taken, for example, by Lenin, the most famous Marxist of his generation. A second development resulted from political science as an academic discipline, especially in the US towards the end of the 19th century. Among the materials on offer to study were the rather miscellaneous that theories all of those who had written and with one idiom or another about politics. Words like theory and doctrine lacked the requisite technical for developing inquiry, so ideology came to be used to refer to this entire miscellany of beliefs. Including both political ideas and what we're here marking off as a special kind of intellectual creation. Ideology was impressive sounding and was to generate many books with chapters recounting the arguments of the various isms of which political debate is composed. The story of the word is then remarkable, covering as it does true, false, and political. Since the whole academic industry around the project of constructing the very many variant meanings of the term, there is a clear case for leaving it to the mercies of nomenclature mysticism, but it continues with a past suggests that it remains useful. Ideologies, by contrast with political doctrines, claim exclusive truth. They explain not only the world, but the false belief of opponent as well. Ideologies possess a long-sought knowledge of how to abolish politics and create the perfect society. How might one put the claim to the test? Marx himself wrote in a thesis of Feuerbach of 1846 that theoretical problems have their solution in practice. The logical character of Marxism as for further ideologies is by the test revealed in the action of its followers when they come to power. They have invariably done is to institute a reign of truth, in which discussion disappears and nothing else but ideology is taught in schools, universities, the media, the law, and everywhere else. And this characteristic of Marxism is a universal truth, unaffected by culture. In Cuba, along with Spanish America, in many states of Africa and China, and most notably in the Soviet Union until its collapse, exactly the same policy was adopted. For it follows directly from the ideology itself. It is easy to confuse ideologies and political doctrines. Because of how they look, it's always in large part determined by audience and context. Communists and other ideologies work in liberal democracy. States must present their beliefs as if they were merely policy options to be supported by general and arguable reasons. For the ideology, dogmatism merely looks absurd except in conversation with fellow believers. On the other hand, enthusiasm may infect any political doctrine with the belief that its principles alone can save the world from evil. Libertarians who believe that political problems are caused only by governments interfering in the natural contractual relationship between individuals are moving from a rhetorical to the ideological. Democracy is sometimes the watchword of those who think that all political problems could be solved if only we became a real democracy. We may say that the constitute illusion of ideology is that there's a possible structural society whose achievement would allow rational actors to create a happy world. Ideology is commonly signaled by the presence of a tripartite structure of theory that first reveals to us that the past is a history of oppression of some abstract class of person. Ideology is commonly signaled by the presence of a tri-structure of theory that first reveals to us that the past is a history of oppression of some abstract class of person. It is concerned with workers as a class, not as a politician might be with workers at a particular time and place, or with women in general. Specific discontents are all swept up in a symptomatology of a structurally determined oppression. The duty of the present is thus to mobilize the oppressed class in the struggle against the oppressive system. This struggle is not confined to the conventional area of politics. It flares up everywhere, even in a remote recess of the mind. And the aim of the struggle is not to obtain a fully just society, a process generally called liberation. Ideology is just a variation played on the themes of oppression, struggle, and revelation. Politics, by contrast, assumes that any state will contain many ways of life, and that a responsive political order must make it possible for its subjects to follow their own bent. One implication in the practice is that most of life will not be about politics, any more than most of football consists of arguing with the referee. The doctrine that everything is political is an infallible sign of ideological project, replacing the rule of law by the management of people. A further implication is that society will necessarily be imperfect, for it allows people to be morally responsible. Some of them are certainly going to be irresponsible. Ideology challenges politics in the name of an ideal in which all desires are satisfied, but first simplify the issue by ruling out court all but a remarkable limited schedule of approved desires. Usually called needs, the word community often stands for a simple way of life in which we all live in a single basic role, a comrade, a sister, or a mere human. The classic ideologists of the last 2 centuries have dreamed of the drama of revolution. Their only conception of political activity was working to make this grand event come about. No moth ever flew into the flames with more enthusiasm than the revolutionary. Revolutionary had turned out to be but the dream from which the drama emerged is far from gone. We must next consider how it mingles with deeper currents of contemporary thought. Alright, my friends, so thank you very much. This is Lord Abed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. And make sure you answer the questions, guys. If you're reading this in the future, make sure you just do your best in the questions, and just answer with 3 or 4 lines, very basic answers. Alright, thanks a lot, guys. See you later.